Good evening. Can you hear me? I always told I have a tiny voice, so I'll do my best. So thank you for coming tonight and really supporting this organization. I'm going to share my story in coping with my son's dyslexia and our difficult journey, as well as a few things we can laugh at. My son's name is Dustin Bennett. He is 30 years old now. I won't hit every stage of life, but I'm going to share some points of discovery and struggle along the way because the awareness and help for dyslexia has just not been there. And the earlier years set out a course for who they become as adults. The problem for Dustin started as early as preschool. He wasn't able to enter in kindergarten because his coordination was not developed enough. Even though he was already a year older than the other students. So, and at that time also he was already getting picked on by the other kids for being different. He would defend himself with beating them up and biting them. I was called out of work every day for months to come to the school and deal with his behavior. We got past that, and when he finally reached first grade, I was told he would have to be held back again because although he was doing good in math, he was failing in the reading and writing. With Dustin already being older, I spent 2 whole days calling every private school in town until I finally found one that would take him. They were a special needs learning school, and they used all the learning senses to teach the child. I was only able to afford it for 2 years as the tuition was $5,000 a year and I was a single mom working full-time. They were able to move him forward with the basic reading and writing so he could integrate into the public school system with the special education classes. I still did not know at that time what the problem really was, as the schools would only say it's a learning or a reading disability as to not label the children. So while going through those elementary years in the special education classes, the teacher would tell me that his learning disability is just like phonetics. It would eventually click for Dustin and he would just get it. Well, that definitely never happened. When doing homework night after night, year after year, he would get so frustrated. He would slide off the kitchen chair, slink under the table, whining and moaning in complete anguish. And I would look at him and say, "Dustin, what is wrong with you?" Then I would write the teacher a long, frustrating note crying out for help, which never came. I had to do every assignment with him in order to pass. He would flip math signs and couldn't comprehend reading. It took so much effort to read individual words that by the time he got to the end of a sentence, the poor thing had no idea what he had just read. But honestly, one of the worst side effects for Dustin going through school was he could never make or keep friends. He was continually picked on and in fights, being made fun of for his communication and mannerisms. I was constantly dealing with his anger and sadness, which included both of us being in counseling for years just to cope with it. We put Dustin back into a private school for junior high at the time I did remarry, and my husband said to me, "Dustin is the first kid I've seen that just throws away his homework without any regard whatsoever." That's how much he hated to read. The special education teacher decided to test Dustin to see what his learning disability actually was. When she told us he had dyslexia, there was some relief because we finally had an answer. Now we understood why he wasn't coordinated early on and couldn't comprehend and when reading. The only problem was we couldn't find anyone to help with it. So the burden was on me to get him through school, even with the special education classes. Once we got to high school, we couldn't really figure out what Dustin was good at, what skills he had, what field of training he could even go into for a career, and the anger of being rejected by other students was getting worse and harder to manage. We put him into an expensive program that retaught him the alphabet in 3D clay and practice of word memorization through pictures. This did help the reading a little, but never the spelling. Finally, in his senior year of high school, he took a computer-aided drafting class, and he not only loved it, but he won second place in the citywide competition. It all made sense because people with dyslexia see and learn things in a visual way, especially 3D. We finally thought he had a career path, but due to the learning and the social side of the school being so hard on him, he wanted a year off before he went back for any other education. So he got a job at Taco John's and was almost fired for not being able to learn all the tasks. Fortunately, his manager had studied psychology and said to him, "Dustin, I'm going to stop yelling at you and make you repeat these tasks over and over again until you get it." Well, that was exactly what he needed. He excelled in that year, for a year in that job, and was prepped for management. It was also the point where we knew that dyslexia was going to interfere with job performance. It would take the right manager willing to understand him and train him in a visual, repetitive way for him to be successful. Once his manager left, Dustin was unable to keep that job and bounced through a few others where he was fired and emotionally broken, and so was I. At that point, I told Dustin he would need to get a technical college degree to learn his skill in drafting so he could have a career. I figured if he was already trained, he could be hired and succeed. I took out all of my IRA savings and paid the college tuition for his associate's degree in computer-aided drafting. The college, however, did not do the level of training for him that he needed, and when he graduated, the economy went down with the housing market. So he was unable to get work in the drafting field even after a year of keeping up on all his computer skills. So Dustin tried a little bit of security work, but mostly he went a very long time without getting work or getting fired from jobs and cycling through depression. All of this unproductive downtime was killing both of us internally. It was heartbreaking and stressful. He went back to college finally with a student loan this time to learn CNC, which is computer numeric control, as it was close to the drafting field and there's a job market for it. Of course, I had to teach him writing rules every night for weeks so he could pass the college assessment and get accepted into the college. He worked security during that time, and like any good dyslexic, he was very strict on the rules. It's all black and white, no gray. So a perfect example of this was when he was guarding the gate to the Coca-Cola plant that required employees show their badge before they could enter. A car came up and a man was in it and motioned for the gate to be opened. Dustin did not open the gate, but waited. The man then told him to open it, and Dustin said, "You need to show me your badge." The man got really mad at him and said, "You should know who I am, so open this gate." And Dustin said, "I don't care who you are, I'm not opening this gate until you show me your badge." So the man gets out of the car and tells Dustin that he is the CEO of the company. So he did respect Dustin for that. He respected him for holding to those rules and showed him his badge and shook his hand. After Dustin did complete that college for CNC, he did land a job in that field. However, because the dyslexia was so prevalent, he was not able to advocate for himself and handle the way he was being treated or trained. The supervisor would give him a verbal instruction on how to set up a machine, and after doing something wrong, he would get yelled and cursed at. Dustin truly heard the information differently than what was told to him, which is normal for someone with dyslexia. I reached out to the American Disabilities Office, but they leave it to you to push for any job support or accommodations. In fear that he would be fired, I tried to coach Dustin on how to communicate with his boss and tell him that he had dyslexia, and that he was going to need help to learn. I even pretended to be someone like Laura in this organization by sending anonymous information, but I was just unable to do what he needed, and so Dustin was unable to remain in that hostile environment. Upon researching the cause of dyslexia, we learned that it's not actually a reading disorder. It's a language impairment that comes through the hearing of information and the speed of which it comes. The brain is unable to break down words into their basic units of speech called phonemes, which is why they confuse letters such as B and D, G and P. And that's why a dyslexic has to learn repetitively with visual hands-on experience. A short time later, Dustin finally got his dream job in computer-aided drafting. However, unfortunately, after 7 months, he was let go because he didn't have enough knowledge to continue in the design and engineering aspect of the field. He was completely crushed and lost in what to do. It was really almost too much for either of us to bear. If I had found jobs for Dyslexics organization during that time, I believe Dustin would still be working at one of those 2 jobs today. Coping with all the loss and trying to reach Dustin's goal for a drafting career, we thought that more college training for mechanical engineering would do the trick. But again, we ran into issues with the support for how he would need to learn, which was not even going to be there in the college. So he returned to security work to pay bills and live. Once I found Laura and the Jobs for Dyslexic organization, there was a huge sigh of relief because finally somebody understood what we were going through, how a dyslexic thinks, how they learn, how they speak, and that we would actually be able to get support for his career. The biggest fear as a mom is that you want to know that your child is going to be able to support themselves in life before you die, and maybe even have friendships. Dustin was in a lot of denial because he just wanted to be normal and not have to say he had a disability. And because all of the rejection and feeling angry, he would appear very stoic and closed off. This whole journey has been a complete emotional roller coaster. Laura has been able to address with Dustin not only his personality issue and presentation of himself, but also improving his resume to really target his experience, even with so many job changes. And probably the hardest part has been coaching him on how to successfully interview by telling his work history story and answering questions without saying too much. A great example of an interview question we coached Dustin on was, describe a conflict you had with a coworker and how you resolved it. Like a perfect dyslexic, Dustin's visual definition was to define conflict as an all-out brawl or yelling match. It took a lot of discussion with Dustin to get him to agree visually that conflict also just means a disagreement, not necessarily an aggressive action. We call dyslexia the silent disability in our home because it's not visible. It shows up in scrambled communication or mixing up of information, which grossly affects the social and vocational health of the dyslexic. People just think they're strange and yell at them like they're dummies. It is priceless to know that once my son gets his career job, he will have the support from this organization to learn the way he needs to learn on that job and to be able to keep it with ongoing support. A mediator is desperately needed to be successful. There is no other organization in this whole nation that provides this kind of help for dyslexic adults. Believe me, I looked for a year. As well as for the parents who struggle with them. The support is twofold. So I really am extremely grateful for Jobs for Dyslexics, and I hope that you will share in our journey with your continued support and generosity. So thank you again for coming and hearing my story.
Thank you.